It is my absolute pleasure to bring to the stage the director of For the Love of Spock, Adam Nimoy. So, first question is, and I know I asked you this right before we came to the theater. What was the what was the last time you saw this movie from start to finish? Here.
Technically challenged, unlike Spock. Last time we saw this film, it's been a while. It's been a long while. I don't think I've seen it on the big screen for probably 5 years since we started screening it regularly. So it's been a while.
What was it like for you watching it right now?
It's not as embarrassing as I thought it was. It's not as embarrassing as I was worried it might be. The film was really difficult to make. I was really unsure myself while we were making it because we knew that it was going to be a Spock-centric film, but then after my dad died, it was pretty clear, as I say in the film, that there was this overwhelming emotional outpouring, not only just for Spock, but for Leonard the artist, Leonard the humanist, and the philanthropist, the photographer. So it became clear we needed to have an element of his life and times as well in the film. But then a lot of people kept saying to me while we were making the film, well, you got to include your own story in it because anybody can make a documentary about Spock and Leonard, but nobody can tell my own personal journey with these guys, which was something I resisted because I didn't want to make the film about me. I was very concerned about the balance between the three of us. I think it still holds up because we spent a lot of time trying to carefully make sure that it was first and foremost. Thank you. I still worry about it. I still want to take cuts of me out of it. It had to be first and foremost Spock, and then it had to be about Leonard. And the C story and the last story in that order is my relationship with my dad. And I was remembering recently that we screened an early copy of the show of the movie for my ex-wife Nancy, my first wife. And when we came out of she came to Paramount, and when we came out of the room, she said to me, "I'm so worried. I think there's too much of you in it." And I said, "Really?" She goes, "Yeah, I think it could be really embarrassing for you. I think it could be bad." So I went back to the editing room, and we had a really good editing team, but we had Janice Hampton as the senior editor. Now, Janice was a woman who had a lot of experience. We went through a couple of editors. I wasn't sure about Janice. I had lunch with her. But I liked her because she had a lot of experience cutting on film when editors cut on real film. She was a woman, and I felt that we needed a woman's sensibility. There were way too many men making this movie. And thirdly, she knew absolutely nothing about Star Trek. And that was the clincher of boom, you're hired, because I wanted someone with that perspective. And I went back to the editing room and I said, "Janice, I'm worried, Nancy's saying there's too much of me in the film." And Janice said, "Your ex-wife is not the demographic we are appealing to." The answer is no. And I made Janice go through the whole film, cut by cut, to see if we could take something more and more of me out of it. And she kept saying, "No, no, no. It makes no sense if you start taking these pieces out. It's like a house of cards. It's just going to collapse." So I still worry about the C story and that there's too much of me in there. And I think it's okay. I don't know. I leave it to you to judge.
Okay, so I review movies. Okay. I got to tell you, because I have not seen this, and when I knew that we were going to have this conversation, I thought, oh, well, I'll watch the film and I'll write down all my questions and everything. But first of all, I don't need to write down questions about Star Trek and this movie. Second of all, I was like, you know what? I think I want to wait until we're actually here to see it, because it has been for 5 years. The last time was when we were working on the Blu-ray release. There's a director's commentary, the commentary track of me having a conversation with Adam. That was the last time I saw the film. And I got to tell you, it really holds up perfectly. There is not too much of you in the C story. It is a perfect balance of the Spock, your father, and you. It's just absolutely, the balance is absolutely
Thank
perfect.
you, Scott. Coming from you, that means a lot. And by the way, I just want to say that when we were doing the voiceover commentary about the film, you talked through the whole thing. Scott knows way too much about Star Trek: The Original Series. I mean,
They know.
yeah, I mean, the producer that we had, Dave Zapone, knew everything he needed to know about Star Trek: The Original Series, and Scott can match him blow by blow. These guys know everything you need to know about Star Trek: The Original Series, and a lot of things you simply do not need to know about Star Trek: The Original Series.
That's the truth. That is absolutely the truth. But I remember,
It's chilling.
I remember reading about like when you first started working on this, like the first announcement, it was in one of the trades, and it was while your father was still with us, and it was about the pop cultural impact of Spock, and then we lost your father, and then it changed. So how much time was there between when you were working on it with your father to when you picked it up and went in a different direction with it? How much space was there in between?
Well, when I started with, I mentioned to my dad, this is like around November of 2014. And he reminded me, in fact, that we were right at the 50th anniversary of the original pilot. They started shooting after Thanksgiving in 1964. So he started doing research right away on it, and he was tickled by, he Googled Spock ears or Spock's ears, and he got like, I don't know, 10,000, maybe even more, I don't know. He was just tickled by how much stuff there was on the internet about Star Trek and the origin of Star Trek. Then what happened was in around January of 2016, I think it was, maybe it was December, he got the call about the next Trek movie with J.J. Abrams, and he was saying to me, I had to turn it, he was very depressed, he said, I had to turn it down. I'm like, why? He said, they're going to start in the spring, and I don't think I'm going to be here. And I'm just like, what? Wow, really? And he says, yeah, I don't feel good, I don't think I should commit to it because I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. And so then, that was probably December of 2015, and so in January of 2016, no, it was 2014. In January of 2015, I went to his house and I said, we need to start making this movie right away. We got to start doing some interviews with you. I want to get your final thoughts on Star Trek, like your last word, basically. And he said, well, what's your hurry? We have until next year to release this thing. I said, what's my hurry? You just said you don't think you're going to be around in the spring. And he said, I was having a bad day. That's nonsense. There's really nothing to worry about. This is January of 2015. He was gone at the end of February. So it was after my dad passed that this deluge, I mean, it was insane. The response that, we knew he had fans all over the world. I mean, that was no surprise, but people were coming out of the woodwork contacting me, people I knew at, elementary school, and the stuff of, Obama released, there was a press release from the president's office. I mean, it was just nuts. There was so much stuff, so many reports, so many magazines, so many newspapers, front page, upper half on the LA Times, and in the calendar section, front page of the New York Times. It just went on and on and on. And that's when this avalanche, and we were just sort of in development at the time, and that's when Dave Zapone and some of the other filmmakers or producers helping me with this project realized that, okay, this is not a Spock film anymore. We need to expand this film to really include my dad. And then that's when, people started saying, dude, you got to do your story. I don't think so. It's got to be, you got to include yourself in it. It's the interesting hook to the story, and that, with much resistance, we finally included that in as well.
I'm so glad you did. I mean, aren't you glad? It's just so wonderful. It's so honest, and it is obviously extremely honest. So while you were going through the letters, like that letter from 1973, and other things that were extremely personal between you and your father, like, did you find it like cathartic, like a healing process? Because you're very honest about the moments of estrangement that you had over the years, the difficulties. Did you find it like healing to move forward with all of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think I had an experience that most people don't get, which is that I really got a chance to review his life. I mean, this is the thing, in the editing room, we had so much material that we're looking at, and photographs of my family that I'd never really even seen before. I don't remember, there's so many photo shoots with the family, I don't remember this stuff at all. And it's pouring in, all this stuff is pouring in, and we're reviewing all this film and all the stuff that he did, and the plays he did, and the films, you know, the movies he did, and Kid Monk Baroni and Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I mean, it's like, it's like I'm really processing the fact that he's gone, and I'm now reviewing his entire life. That's the thing about when you lose somebody, it's not just the old and sick Leonard, you know, that you lose everything from the very beginning. And it was kind of a unique, really, opportunity for me to process processing the grieving of losing him. It was a really good cathartic experience for me, and it was overwhelming, and it was really nice. I mean, we were just overwhelmed with so much material, which is why I was so glad we had someone like Janice who kept, you know, I kept trying to cram stuff in to this can of stuff that I think that we should have of Leonard, and Janice was like, no, we're staying on theme, we're staying on topic. I mean, I kept trying to get like Catlow. You guys know about Catlow? I don't know if you know about this film. After he finished with Mission Impossible, he got an offer to make a film in Spain, like a spaghetti western, with Yul Brynner, and Dad played the heavy. He played Miller, the heavy. You know, Dad didn't like calling them bad guys because there's no life to it. There's no internal life to a bad guy. You know, the heavy, there's a reason why he is who he is, and he was excellent in it. I loved him in it. He was so good in buckskin and the rifle and, you know, the beard. He just looked fantastic, and we were all in Spain. It was a great experience for me, and every time I come into the editing room, Janice would almost immediately greet me in the morning saying, "There's no Catlow in this film." No, the answer is no. Janice, can we just, no, it's not on topic, it's not on theme, it's irrelevant. No, the answer is no.
So how long was your first cut? Like, do you remember how long the first cut was?
Yeah, we were probably close to 2 hours. You know, nothing crazy. No, it wasn't. You know, this isn't like, I don't know, Francis Ford. You know, we weren't.
It wasn't like Peter Jackson's Beatles documentary.
No, it was not. Not 6 hours of Beatles. No, 8 hours. No. We had some good direction. We did have a theme. We did have an idea. I mean, I've been making TV for a long time. You got to work really fast, and you got to edit this stuff really quickly. The fact of the matter is, we raised the money for this film on Kickstarter. This is why you saw those names at the end credits. Here's this gentleman here was contributed to our film. All of you who contributed, thank you very much. And the rest of you, I don't know what to say. But the fact is, we raised the money for this film in June of 2015. We premiered this film at the Tribeca Film Festival in April of 2016, or July, I think, is when we raised the money. July to April. I mean, that's pretty freaking fast work. But we had a lot of people working on it. We had some good editorial help. We had good help, and we had vision. You know, we had a slave driver, Janice Hampton. So we kind of knew really going into it what we were after, you know, right away.
I remember when you came on Access Hollywood to announce the Kickstarter for the film. And then the next thing I know, you know, David or you're like, hey, you want to moderate a Q&A with me at Tribeca? And I'm like, are you finished? Like, I couldn't believe how fast you did this. It was really awesome. So a couple of things that I sort of took away from watching it today is, so that convention in 2015, after all those years, from the early 70s, 1972, that first convention in New York that had like 2,000 people and was only supposed to have 300, that was your first convention? How come you never like sort of dipped your toe in the convention world before that?
Well, okay, in all honesty, I spent a minute at a convention in Pasadena in the 70s. I think I was there very quickly, in and out of there. I didn't want to go, you know, just like wasn't my thing. I'm trying desperately to create my own identity. Yeah. And I just I didn't want to go with him, and I did all that as a kid, and, you know, traipsing around in his shadow was just not pleasant, you know, watching all this mass adulation for Leonard when Leonard and I were in trouble constantly. I mean, this was really the story of my life with him. I would have these knockdown dragouts, and then I'd go to the cleaners to pick up my shirts, and the guy would say, Nimoy, are you related? Yeah, I'm related. Oh, well, you are, oh my God, your dad saved my life. When I was in college, we watched him all the time. I mean, he's just the most amazing guy. You are so lucky. He must be a fantastic father. You are one of the luckiest guys on the planet. It's like, yeah. Can I have my shirts, please? And I'm like dealing with that all the time. And it's just, it's like everywhere I turned, there was Leonard, there was Spock, images of Spock. So I just couldn't do it. I could not do it. I didn't want to go there. I would be tagging along with him, and it just didn't interest me.
One of the things, so like the pandemic has actually given me an opportunity to do something I always wanted to do. I started a Star Trek podcast last April, and it's a deep dive on the original series. And I mean, deep. We talk about a 50...
Too much Trek.
There is no such thing as too much Star Trek. There is no such thing. In fact, wait a minute. We did one of our podcasts was on metamorphosis, with the companion. So the episode is 50 minutes long. Our podcast is 2 hours and 55 minutes long. So that's why you got to come on. But by going back and rewatching these episodes, which I've seen hundreds of times each, but I'm going back and I'm rewatching them with a different set of eyes and really, really, really breaking them down, deconstructing them. And I had so many epiphanies, and we're almost halfway through the series. But when I was watching This Side of Paradise, and I was reminded, because you used the clip in the film of your father in the transporter room with Joe Iron. That was his figure consideration moment. That is why he was nominated for the first time for Best Supporting Actor at the Emmys. And we just, 2 weeks ago, covered Amok Time. And I think Amok Time is Leonard's greatest performance as Spock, because of what he was saying about how he played Spock, the way he was not unemotional, he was suppressing his emotions. And that's the perfect example of that. And that's why he got nominated a second time. And he was nominated for the third season. So that's 3 years in a row, all 3 seasons. So the point is that the pop cultural impact is obvious. But more importantly than that, your father was a great actor. He was a great actor. And I think that this shows that. You picked some great scenes, but at the same time, his commitment to it made it difficult for the family. And I just was wondering, seeing Julie interviewed, how cathartic was it for her to be a part of this film?
Well, Julie and I had a very different relationship with my dad, interestingly enough. I think it was, I think a lot of it had to do with the processing of losing him. I think it was a really good experience for her. I'm lucky that I have her to go through the journey with. We did a lot of processing together about what this film could be about, how she should participate in the film. I don't know how I could have survived the experience, frankly, without my sister. I'm so close to her. It's just, we had really nutty parents. It was, it was crazy. A lot of crazy stuff went down, and it was very difficult. A lot of challenges we had in our personal lives, not unlike what other people go through. But I'm so lucky. She's only 18 months older than me, and I just think, and I wanted her feedback. I needed her validation. I needed her approval. I wanted to make sure we did everything right. The only regret I have, and Julie and I have discussed this, is that we never, oddly enough, as much as we mention our mother, we never mention her name in the film. That's the only regret I have, that we didn't pick up on. Neither of us picked up on that. My mother's name was Sandy, by the way, just so you know. But we do. I think we do honor her, and that was really important for both of us, to show that she was really holding down the fort for us, because we gave my mother a real run for her money. Mostly Julie gave her a run for the money. Julie was a wild child. But so I think it was very cathartic for both of us to be going through the experience. And then she made her own film, you know.
Yeah, she did. That's right.
You know, and so remembering Leonard Nimoy. So, and I think it was really helpful for her to go through the grieving process as well.
What, like when you're watching the film, like today, like, I don't want to say, like, is there anything you would change? Because, I mean, you already answered that question. But, like, is there anything new? Like, because, you know, when you're making the film, you're in it, you don't have any perspective because you're working on it every day, and then you're publicizing it. But it's been 5 years. So is there something new that maybe you discovered about your father? And, this might get a little heavy, is there something that you discovered about yourself?
I don't know, Scott. It's a tough question. I think we pretty much said it all. If any changes I would make, I would take 10 minutes out of the film. I'd make it shorter. There's not much I would change. I think it just stands on its own. I do think it's slow at some point. You know, there's just a pacing issue here and there. I do want to mention, though, about a lot of the serendipity about making the film, and that is that letter that I read from October 1973. I did not know it existed while we were making the film. It happened, I was going through some boxes of material looking for anything on Dad, and this letter turned up. I had no idea it existed. That was one element that was serendipitous. The other element that I do want to mention was this whole segment about my late wife, Martha, because I didn't know how to handle that at all. And in fact, I wasn't going to do a whole lot on that subject of losing Martha, and then which brought my dad and I back together again. But I happened to be in New York, and I happened to see Hamilton on Broadway with the original cast. And what fascinated me about the play was it is relentlessly fast-paced and intense throughout the show until they get to his personal tragedy, which is the loss of his son. And then everything stops. And you need the break, and you want to take it to really experience what this man was feeling and thinking when he tragically lost his son. And it was sitting in that play when I thought, I got to make more of a moment out of this. I just have to do it. I wasn't sure, and I went back to Janice, and I showed her what I had of Martha, and she said, we're doing it. We've got to do it. You know, I think it's still an okay decision. It's very personal. Okay, thank you, because I'm on the fence about stuff like that, you know. I tried to be vulnerable and bare my soul about my own experience with my dad because, you know, the first phone call I made after I got the diagnosis, we got the diagnosis from a doctor who happened to be a guy I knew as a soccer dad. He was on the field when my daughter was playing soccer. This is 10 years before. And I didn't even realize it was the same guy, you know, Bob Wolf. I knew him as Bob. Well, we went to see Dr. Robert Wolf, this pulmonary guy, and he's the one who diagnosed her. So after we met with him in his office, I called him up and I said, I want to know what the prognosis is for her. And he said, well, we have to see how she responds to treatment, he said. No, Bob, I want you to tell me right now what you personally think about what her chances are of survival. And he said, to be honest with you, I don't think she's going to make it. Her cancer's too advanced and her lymph nodes are involved. She's got a very slim chance of survival. It was a slight breakdown in my car, but after that moment, I called my father. Unheard of, just a couple of years before, unheard of. I called my dad. He was at dinner with my uncle, met with his wife, Susan, my stepmother, and my uncle, Mel and Aunt Sybil, who you saw, and he said to me, and I told him, and he said, where are you? I said, like, I'm in a parking lot at my mechanics. He said, we're at dinner. I'm going to have Mel and Sybil take Susan home. I'll come to you. I said, no, you don't need to do that. I just needed to tell somebody, and that somebody was you. Yeah, so that's the power of recovery. I'm sorry to say it. I mean, I'm embarrassed a little bit to say it, but it's 12-step recovery which brought me back to my father and you know, brought us close together to the point where the day he died and I was alone with him in the room, there was such a feeling of satisfaction and unity between the two of us because we got it right, thank God. We got it right. The last 4 or 5 years of his life, I was really tight with him. I was with him all the time, hanging out with him, and we just let go of the past. And I made an amends, and he made his amends to me was what we call living amends. I mean, this is part of my problem with him. He was supposed to be in recovery, and he never made amends to me, which infuriated me. Step 9. Step 9, and he never did it. And when he started taking care of me and helping me with Martha and taking me to Beit Teshuvah, Residential Addiction Treatment Center, for Shabbat service on Friday night, the rabbi who I was close to said to me, "This is his amends. We call it a living amends. Enjoy it. This is it. You guys did it. Celebrate it."
Wow.
And we did.
Wow. Amazing. I would love to open up to the audience if you have questions. And wow, that was fast. There's a question right there. Yes, nice and loud.
Thank you for the movie. I really enjoyed it. My question is that the symbol that your father used for live long and prosper is a Jewish symbol from the Kohanim blessing. And I'm wondering, and you didn't really refer to it, was Judaism a part of your life growing up, or how did that come into your life?
Interestingly, a great question. Was Judaism a part of my life growing up? Because of the symbol, the Vulcan salute, which is taken from, as discussed in the film, from the Kohanim who blessed the congregation during Yom Kippur. Interestingly enough, I mean, we did go to services. I was bar mitzvahed. We didn't keep the kosher home. Both of my sets of grandparents were pretty much Orthodox kosher. And my mom and my dad were like, "We're not doing that here. That's crazy. We're not doing that." I think, I mean, I did spend a lot of time in shul with my dad, and my dad was more traditionally Jewish and into the culture of Judaism and the traditions of Judaism than he was in the religious aspect. I was much more, frankly, into Torah, into going to shul, into fasting on Yom Kippur. I was much more into that than he ever was. But I mean, he introduced me to it, and it really, had a huge impact on my life. And an interesting thing happened in the 80s when I was back in LA going to law school. My dad used to, on Yom Kippur in the afternoon, he read from the book of Jonah. Every year at our synagogue at Adat Shalom in Westwood, my dad would read the book of Jonah from beginning to end, the story of Jonah and the whale, which is how my son got his name, coincidentally. And I remember one time I had this really weird experience where I was at the temple. There's nobody in the afternoon on Yom Kippur. Everybody goes to the morning service, then they go home just trying to get through the day, and then they come back for the Nila service, the very last service at night, before they can go home and finally eat something, So there's no one in there. And I was thinking to myself, the door was open to the street. You could park on the street. I was thinking to myself, if Star Trek fans knew that Leonard Nimoy was here, reading Book of Jonah, and he read it beautifully. I mean, he was just outstanding. His voice was just, the guy was amazing. He had a lot of talent, and I was really enjoying this thing. I just thought the place would be packed if people knew that they could just park out front, put a quarter in the meter, and listen to Leonard Nimoy for 20 minutes. The weird thing about that experience was that I was bar mitzvahed at Adat Shalom, and on the walls they had these murals. They were tile mosaics of scenes, Bible scenes. And there was one of like a guy, religious man, beard and the tallit, blue sky, and he's blowing shofar. Very beautiful. But behind me was a mural, and I had trouble kind of figuring out what it was at first. It was blue sky on a mountaintop somewhere, young man lying on his back, bound, hands and feet bound, and blindfolded. And underneath him, Isaac, underneath him was wood. And it slowly occurred to me what I was looking at, the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, when Abraham was about to sacrifice his own son. And I thought to myself, this is freaking disgusting. It's the most, I've been studying Torah for 8 years. It still is the most troublesome passage of all 5 books of Moses. And it really made me think about my relationship with my father, because sometimes I really felt that if he had the opportunity, he would have killed me. We would have killed each other, This is, the impact of Torah, because the fact of the matter is, this is really endemic in the Jewish tradition. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob all had trouble with each other, fathers and sons, complete and total dysfunction. And the issue for me came to, after reading these stories and learning about the Jewish tradition is how do you break the cycle? Please, God, do I have to repeat the anger and the animosity between these? After this event happened between Abraham and Isaac, they never spoke again. They went their separate ways, never to see each other again in Torah. Isaac favored Esau over Jacob. Jacob stole the blessing from Esau from his dad. Jacob had 12 sons, hated all of them, except for 2. Those born from Rachel, his favorite wife. That was Joseph and Benjamin. So dysfunction, do we have, Jewish tradition growing up? Yes. We had Shabbat at my grandmother's every Friday night. And this is what it wrought from me, is studying Torah and really taking to heart what it means, to learn the lessons of our tradition and find ways to improve and transcend some of that stuff. Long answer to a short question.
Yeah, last week with Hanukkah, but happy belated Hanukkah, everybody. So I heard the Adam Sandler song, and, the Hanukkah song. And he's like, you could deck the halls with Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock. Spin the dreidel with Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock, both Jewish. That's my Jewishness. Who else has a question? Right here.
I have a question, but first of all, I want to show you what your dad means to me, if I may. I know it.
Dude, that is messed up.
I know it's crazy. But when I turn 40, I say to my wife, I'm gonna get a tattoo. And the
Tattoo of Spock on his leg here. You gotta see this if you get a chance.
So the only character that came to my mind, it was Spock, and losing your father was like losing a member of my family. My question is, you mentioned in your documentary that your father was like a Renaissance man. There is anything that your father wanted to do during his life that he wasn't able to do it?
Is there anything that my father wanted to do during his life that he was not able to do? The answer is absolutely, positively no. The guy could do anything. I mean, he was building furniture when I was a kid, and we didn't have any money. The guy was building furniture for our house. I don't know where he got the skill. I mean, no, really, it's uncanny what Leonard could do. I mean, he was growing like plants from seeds. This is during the 70s when he couldn't figure out what to do with himself. He had like a hothouse going back in our pool house, growing asparagus ferns, which I thought was the weirdest thing in the world. I mean, people grow orchids, that makes sense, asparagus ferns. And he'd say, look at them. I grew this from a seed. It's like, Dad, we're not on the Enterprise anymore, right? I mean, I was worried about this guy. It was very strange. He could do anything. I mean, he just had so much talent, and just, the guy was never, he was just not an academic. He just couldn't do school, which is why I wanted to, succeed in school. That was probably the only thing that I think that he felt that maybe he was a little shortchanged on. But he had like Nick Meyer's saying, he had an incredibly inquisitive mind. He had a very hungry mind for knowledge and interested in all kinds of aspects of life. So, no, I wanted to say about this tattoo situation. My son Jonah, the rock and roller, went out and got a tattoo. His first tattoo was on his shoulder, and it's the freaking Misfits. You guys know the Misfits? It's like, yeah, okay, yeah, somebody applauds here. It's a crazy cult for this band. I like the Misfits, but, and that insignia of theirs is like freaking everywhere. Jonah goes out and has himself, puts a Misfits tattoo on his shoulder, and he's got ink all over it. It just drove me freaking nuts. I'm like, no more allowance, no more money. I'm not paying for another tattoo. But, so I can understand, and there's more attitude. Incidentally, Jonah now plays in a band called The Offspring. He drums and plays guitar for them somehow, thank God, because get this, talent skips a generation, basically. It went from Leonard to Jonah, because Jonah was a disaster in grade school, just a freaking nightmare. thank God he's just so incredible on drums and guitar, and he plays with this band. He's been with them for a couple of years, and he's got quite a collection of tattoos. But they were at a music festival a month ago in Sacramento, opening for Misfits.
Wait, isn't that his song at the end of the credits?
His song is at the end of the credits. Okay, so at the end of the credits, we do Starman. It's a cover of the David Bowie song, right? We're editing the film. This is January of 2015. I go to the editing room, and one of the editors said, David Bowie just died. I'm like, what? Whoa. Okay, this is less than a year since my father passed. 2 weeks later, I'm at a show of Jonah's band. We're in Silver Lake, and he told me before the show, we're going to do a cover of Starman. Watch this. And I'm like, yeah, let's see what you can do, kid. Blew my mind. They were so good. Blew my mind. Afterwards, I said to him, here's $500. Go in the studio, record the song. We're using the song. Because Starman, I was looking at the lyrics. It sort of applies to Spock. I mean, except you turn it, you turn the channel to channel 2. They were on channel 4. Okay, we're 2 channels off. But the way the song goes, it just felt like this made sense to me, and I wanted to kind of merge these 2 iconic figures, and so it's Jonah playing a cover of Starman at the end of the film.
That's awesome. How awesome is that? Got time for one more question, if anyone has another question. Right here, nice and loud.
I'm just curious. There was a lot of time during Star Trek where obviously your father was very focused on being Spock. But I'm curious when he was available. I assume that there were moments and times, downtime during that period of time, or before or after, where your father was present. You did have some good times. Can you maybe share a memory or two that stand out during that period?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's pretty complicated. The problem was, as a kid, it was really difficult for me to relate to him. I really felt like I was living with a stranger. We just didn't connect. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that he had to grow up very quickly in the Depression era in the West End of Boston. It was a tenement. It was really just an immigrant neighborhood. And he was selling newspapers and working at a camera store and selling vacuum cleaners, and I just never did any of that stuff. He didn't understand, Spider-Man comic books and, 60s TV and the Fab Four. We just couldn't relate on any level. It was very difficult for us to really come together. And he was very Spock-like. I mean, my dad was like, he talked about his father. His dad was a man of very few words, and my dad was a man of not much more in the word department. Just really, really difficult communicating with him. He tried to do the right thing. He did. But there was always this chasm between us that I always tried to overcompensate for with my own son, Jonah. Even after all the stuff I did with Jonah, which, dragging his drum kit everywhere and taking him to soccer and to softball and, and taking him to shows. I took him to an X show. It blew his mind when he was 13. I mean, I was sharing all this music with Jonah. Even then, he hated me. He found reasons to hate me. So, I mean, it's just natural stuff. I mean, now we're really close. I picked him up. He just came back from a tour with the Offspring from the UK. I picked him up at, Bradley Terminal and took him back home over to Silver Lake, and he was overjoyed that I gave him a ride. But, with my dad, it was really tough. He tried to do the right thing. He did. And one of the pivotal moments is in my first book, My Incredibly Wonderful Miserable Life, now available for the low, low price of $4.99 on Amazon, I'm sure. I describe a situation where he took me to a fair at St. Timothy's Church at Beverly Glen and Pico Boulevard. After the series had started, he wanted to try to get some father-son time in together. We went to this fair. A couple fans came up to him, and he signed some autographs, and we tried to continue on with the booths and the rides and everything. Well, within minutes, he was mobbed, and we could never be out in public again. Our lives had completely changed. So I think I really think he wanted to do the right thing. But, playing the role of a loving father, you'd think he could do it, but it was very challenging for him.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Adam Nimoy.
Thank you all for coming out. Really appreciate it.